Hello and welcome to the big picture. The situation in Syria, which has witnessed violence and killings between the government and rebel forces for the last nearly 2 years, peaked last week when over 1,300 people died following a chemical attack. Over a lakh of people have died so far in the last 2 years. Following the chemical attack, the US and its allies are posturing aggressively. The US is convinced that the Bashar al-Assad government is responsible for the chemical weapons attack, while the Syrian president denies it outright. Meanwhile, the UN has sent an inspector's team to verify the truth about the chemical weapons attack, though the US feels that it is too late. Even as the US makes aggressive moves, the entire region is tense. We will discuss today the situation in Syria and whether the UN inspector's team would be able to find the truth and what would be its consequences. To discuss this, I have with me Professor A.K. Pasha, Director Gulf Studies Program at the JNU, Dr. Wahil Awwad, South Asia Bureau Chief, Al Arabiya, Sanjay Kapoor, Editor Hard News, J.C. Sharma, former Secretary MEA, and we'll be joined maybe by another guest, but welcome to all of you. Professor Pasha, I would like to come to you first. Now, there are reports saying that the Syrian government was involved in this chemical attack, and the US is making a lot of aggressive postures. They don't believe that anybody else. If we take the US point of view, what would be the motive of the Syrian government or the president to indulge in this kind of a chemical attack?
Well, the first thing to be noted is the Syrian government has officially denied.
Yes.
That is on record. And to back the Syrian official claim, the Russians also have said this is a provocation.
Right.
And all its allies, Iran, that was expected. But what remains to be confirmed is the UN inspectors who are in place as per an agreement between the UN and the Syrian government to verify earlier claims of chemical weapons having been used. Those sites and places, dates, everything was worked out over a period of 2 months or so. Now, the Syrian government is being asked to throw open the latest areas in the suburbs of Damascus also, where this alleged attack has killed over 1,000 people. I think in principle the Syrian government has agreed to allow the UN inspectors after they have completed verification of the earlier claims. Now, it depends how and when they will report this issue, whether it is the rebels or the Syrian government or who has used, what is the degree, quantum, and so on and so forth, based on all the reports and also the French medical team, which has confirmed about 365 and treated supposedly more than 3,000, so on and so forth. All to put together, the UN has to deliberate.
Right.
And this was a time-consuming process where the Russians, Chinese, and others also will be involved. And the military posturing from the United States has to be seen from two angles.
Now we'll come to the military posturing later. Mr. Sharma, do you think there is a motive for the Syrian government to launch this kind of a chemical weapons attack?
Well, I find it very hard, frankly speaking. I can't see a rationale. What does Assad gain by a chemical attack? Because he's already isolated other than the Chinese and the Russian and the Iranians, and Hezbollah, he has no other real support. And his biggest advantage so far is that the Western democracies have no stomach for taking on a new theater after their experience in Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya. So by doing this, he would be providing a perfect alibi. So this is the thing. Just to update from what Professor Pasha said, I just saw before coming, the UN inspectors have reached there. They left the government-controlled area to go to the area where supposed chemical weapons use had taken place.
But there were attacks on them.
And there were sniper fires on them, and one vehicle was totally out of, sort of completely damaged. As a result, they have returned to the government-controlled area, and the news report said that after reassessing, they would go back to the area and see what the correct situation is. So one, we would have to wait. People are already comparing this. The Russian Foreign Office is already comparing this with the
Iraq.
weapons of mass destruction situation of the Iraq.
Right.
And the fact that chemical weapons were used by Iraq against Iran, and at that time, as the Russian propaganda is, that the Western world was a silent spectator. So it is a very fluid and evolving situation. The Republicans are putting up tremendous pressure on the Obama administration. McCain was also on the show saying that this impacts our credibility.
Right.
But what is important, Girish, is that all the blogs from the American common people, they are very interesting. They say, look, what do we gain? We go get our people killed. People of this region will always be ungrateful to us no matter what we do. So we need not get involved. This is the general refrain.
Right. Let me get Dr. Awwad in on this. Dr. Awwad, I am still not getting this from both my guests here, whether what would be the motivation for anybody to have launched this kind of a chemical weapons attack? What would be the motive, and who would have a motive?
Well, first of all, thank you for taking me, and I have the pleased to inform you that I am no more with Al Arabiya channel.
Okay.
So I will speak my heart as a West Asia analyst, and I will tell you who have the motive, who pushed more than 100,000 mercenaries inside Syria to fight the Syrian government, including 15,000 European mercenaries. These are the people whom from day one they decided a regime change. So therefore, I don't think a government will be insane to use any kind of a chemical weapon, because if you are winning conventionally, you don't need to use non-conventional method. So therefore, they knew there was a major operation inside the rural area of Damascus, and there are enough intelligence there in that region where you have the American, the Israelis, the UK, the French, and the Doctors Without Borders who have sheltered the rebels there, and who claim that there are 360 Syrian have been killed, and the chemical and unverified reports which we have been seeing. I think they have the intention from day one to topple this regime by all means. So therefore, it's just a pretext to get into the Syria quagmire's war and fight those war-mongering nations that they are really wanted to go for a war in Syria.
Okay. We are now joined in by Fayik Yagizay of the Peace and Democratic Party, the Kurdish party from Turkey. He is the representative to the Council of Europe of that party. Welcome to the show, Mr. Fayik. Fayik?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Fayik, my question to you is, this chemical weapons attack which has happened in Syria,
Yes.
whom will it benefit? Why do you think it has happened, and who do you think has the motive to launch such an attack?
Yeah. There is not any reasonable explanation of using chemical weapons against civilians or any other people. So it is impossible to accept this kind of attacks from both sides.
Right.
But there may be some beneficiaries of these attacks, of course, who wants to escalate this war to a regional war between many other actors to be involved in this war. Maybe it has been done by this, but we have to have a deep investigation about this chemical weapon, who it was used by.
You think the UN inspectors team which is there now would be able to bring out the truth?
Yeah, it's very interesting that while they are there, there has been some this kind of attack. It's really very interesting. So maybe some people who want an international intervention to the Syria have done this.
Okay. Sanjay?
Yes.
Sanjay, my question to you is, you have been there several times in Syria. Do you see the rebels having this kind of a capability to launch this kind of an attack?
I wanted to intervene even earlier. There have been major misgivings about the way this chemical attack and the killings are being peddled across by the media there.
Right.
every expert who has seen it would not believe that chemical weapon has been used, because the people who surround these dead bodies are without protection. Israel's famous newspaper Haaretz says that this is absolutely impossible, that chemical gas or poison gas which is used in such huge intensity would not impact the people who surround it. So there are people who have died, but the relatives and other attendants do not wear any kind of protection. The second point that they are saying is that most probably these people were in a bunker, or they were in a safe underground apartment, and there was some kind of tear gas attack and people died of suffocation.
Right.
Because there's no struggle. And I don't think, as you say, the rebels have the capability to do it. If you remember the last time there was this suggestion that chemical attack has taken place, the UN inspector, who was an Italian, actually came out right in the open and said that the Syrian army didn't do it, but it was a doing of some elements in the rebel. But you must understand, the rebels are not just Syrians. You got mercenaries, you got trained people who are involved in covert warfare from different nationalities, who are actually displaying whatever they have, and all kinds of horror stories you read in these websites and blogs about different nationalities and their experts using different ways to ensure that the red line that the Americans have declared, that if you use the chemical weapons, then they would be forced to intervene. So as the Turkish gentleman just said, the attempt is to get United States to come and intervene and bomb the Syrian government out. Till now, President Obama is restraining himself, but the larger objective is this.
Dr. Professor Pasha, do you agree with Sanjay? Is this something which is blowing up into a major, trying to get other actors, as our Turkish friend was saying?
Yes, there has been some restlessness among the regional powers for two reasons. One is the turn of events in Egypt has given some regional powers the confidence that they can push this Syrian agenda to the fore, because the last 6 months have made it very clear that the rebels were on the defensive. The Syrian government was making a series of victories, trying to push the rebels from many important areas.
No, but Dr. Awwad was pointing out that why would any government try to do this when they were almost, on the verge of victory?
Exactly.
Were they on the verge of victory?
Yes.
Was the government on the verge of victory?
Yes, it is very clear. There were a series of victories, I told you, about 4 of them, very crucial, with the support of Hezbollah, of course, which boosted the morale of the Syrian military.
Okay.
And that is the big question. Why, when they were using conventional weapons, the ordinary soldiers, why would they use this chemical weapon, which is a very serious matter? Because
Sanjay
Bashar al-Assad knows.
Sanjay even doubts that this is a chemical weapon attack at all.
I mean, the media has been reporting, and you have also been asking the first question on chemical weapons. So we have been going by the media bombardment. But the second point is the regional countries, Saudi Arabia in particular, has invested a lot in the rebels' cause against Bashar al-Assad.
Right.
And the Israelis also are looking for an opportunity to knock out some of the air defense systems which the Russians have given, the artillery and heavy weapons, so that a no-fly zone, as they established in Libya and in Iraq, could be brought here. And the Turks are also equally interested, because their policy has really become frustrated. And these 3 major powers are in a mood to entice the Americans into not a situation where American soldiers will land up like in Afghanistan and in Iraq, but the cruise missiles are Tomahawk missiles, from which they have built up the capability in the Mediterranean Sea, because even those ships which have completed the duty are being recalled to the eastern part. And a few cruise missiles might be used just to show that America has to do something in order to uphold its superpower status, although it will be a violation of the international law. And there will be responses from Iran, from Syria, from the Russians, and perhaps the other partners also.
Mr. Sharma, you think the US can afford this kind of aggression?
Now, let me say one thing very clearly. US is in no position to put people physically there with the kind of
That's what Dr.
Mess.
Pasha says, and the reports also are.
they are, but their internal politics now, they are under intense pressure. Obama, who has been very, very circumspect and reticent about it, to do something.
Mr.
And
Sharma,
that is what is the likely thing, that few cruise missiles will be fired. If that gives a positive result, that will be fine. But our worry is you have an extremely bad situation in Iraq, you have bad situation in Libya. We don't want to see another country, but the real country which is creating problems is Turkey, where there is an internal clash of...
I think Mr. Fayik Yagizay wants to respond. Yes, Fayik, you wanted to
Yes.
respond?
Yes, Turkey is very concerned with Syrian issue because of the Kurdish region.
Right.
They are very afraid of an autonomous status for Kurdish people in Syria, as he has a big problem inside itself. So they don't want to have a Kurdish regional autonomy in Syria, as now there is one in Iraq, and if there is one in Syria, they will not keep their Kurds in the current position.
Right.
That's why they are very keen in Syria. So for chemical attack, we cannot say this group or other group. It's possible that some groups from Al-Qaeda have done this. So it's possible that regime itself has done this, or some other groups. But the most possible attack which has been done, it's possible that it's by those who wants an intervention, external intervention in Syria.
Fayik, one question which I want to know, how is the Turkish government responding to all this thing, and what kind of a role is Turkey playing in all this? Well,
Yeah,
Mr.
you
Mr. Sharma was saying that Turkey is the key player there.
Yeah, Turkey is very keen in this issue, and they want to be at the front in the Syrian question, because in this case they are planning about after the collapse of the regime. If the regime collapses, there will be a new regime in Syria, and Turkey wants to play a big role in this. That's why they are very keen about this question.
Okay. Dr. Awwad, do you agree with our friend, a Turkish friend?
I didn't hear what the Turkish friend have said, but I'm sure if I understand from his first answer to your question, that there are people, United States even have stated to Russian officials just now,
Yes.
that they are not willing to accept any report even from the UN team if it does not indict the Syrian regime. So
Right.
therefore the American already have in their intention of attacking Syria, and they have already built up the arms in the Jordanian border along with the British and the French, who've been bought by the Qatar government, who invested $50 billion in their economy to boost the morale of the rebels so they can take on the government and do some military action. Because if you remember, the opposition in Syria, or the rebels, have stated 3 statements since the beginning of the Syrian crisis. 1, no dialogue with the government. 2, for a humanitarian corridor. 3, for a military intervention. And I don't think they have deviated for the last 2.5 years. The Syrian government invited the UN team. They invited them for Khan al-Asal, where they have used, with the help of Turkish and the Qataris, Bulgarian, Georgian, and the American, who have supported and given the sarin chemical to the rebels. Now they have created the scene in Damascus. When the Syrian government invited the UN team, how can a government invite somebody to show what they are doing wrong? We are presuming they are doing wrong. So therefore, I think the world is not anymore naive to understand the real intention of creating instability in the region by those people who are claiming to be supporting human rights. Tell me what tomorrow the cruise missile will do when they will attack the Syrian cities. We are a Syrian paying by our own blood the death tolls in the street, the slaughtering, the looting, the killing, the raping is all happening to our Syrian. In peace or in war, they have created, they imposed on us this situation, and we will fight till the end. I can tell you the spirit among the Syrian are very strong, very high morale, and they are supporting their government because they know this is the only government can save them from those dark forces came under the Trojan horse to enter Syria and bring the colonial to our country again.
Okay, Sanjay?
Yes.
Sanjay, my question to you is, Dr. Awwad says, he's pointing out that the US is not really, very happy with the UN team visiting there, and they are not willing to accept. So is this UN inspectors team just, whatever report they give, they are not going to accept, then is this a futile effort which is being made by the UN team?
But let's face it, it'll be very difficult for US and UK to actually go contrary to international opinion, and they would require ratification from the United Nations, despite the fact that William Hague of the British government has said that, if there is humanitarian crisis, they can intervene. But we must recognize the fact that Russia is no longer a small part that it had become after the breakup of Soviet Union. Syria provides Russia an opportunity to rise once again as a superpower, and is very adamant that they will not allow the repetition or replication of what happened in Libya, where they got sucked in. Similarly for China. So it's all right for US and UK to do this kind of saber rattling, but it's going to be extremely tricky because the reality as presented by the US-led alliance and Israel is not recognized by the Russians. Russians think that there was no chemical weapons attack. Right. Similarly for a whole lot of other people. So when the reality is being questioned, when truth has got two sides, it's not going to be so easy.
Yes, Professor.
Yeah. The Western countries, France in particular, has been looking for this regime change for at least a year.
Right.
They prepared many scenarios.
No,
now they become
several obituaries were written about Bashar for the last 1 year.
Yeah, so their talk about red lines has no meaning in international law. And the UN is not going to authorize Britain and France and America to respond in whatever manner, even if the regime has used the chemical weapons, because there are rules and regulations within the UN Charter. So in that way, what Sanjay Kapoor is saying, the West has never listened to UN inspectors, even in the case of Iraq. If they have made up their mind to use force, I think they are going to use it, no matter what the UN team reports there, whether they have used the weapons or not, because a series of disasters over the last 6 months and the disarray in the Syrian national coalition and the opposition has exposed the cracks within the anti-Bashar Assad forces, and they are looking somehow to raise their morale so that Bashar al-Assad's government is on the defensive again. So this is the big picture which emerges.
Yes, very quickly, Sanjay.
Because they're both Lavrov and Kerry have been talking about the Geneva 2, which is going to take place, the conference Geneva. So when the balance of power has shifted in favor of Bashar Assad, there was fear that the whatever discussion that takes place, it be loaded in favor of Bashar's led Syria. So that balance had to be changed, whichever way it could be.
Okay, Fayik.
Yes.
How do you, as a Kurd, how do you look at the scenario now? Where you think the US, if the US gets aggressive in Syria, how would it affect the Kurds?
Yeah, the war in Syria started as a uprising of the people, and then it became a violent civil war after the intervention of other groups in Syria. We, as Kurdish people, are suffering from the regime, and we are struggling against this regime because it is a despotic regime. On the other hand, these groups, which are now trying to replace this regime, they are also not democratic. They are not offering any any democratic future for Syria. That's why Kurdish people decided to be neutral in this war. We really are against war. We want to have our rights in a democratic struggle. But unfortunately now there are attacks from Syrian regime and from these Al-Qaeda linked groups on Kurdish people. You know, Kurdish people are only defending their
Interest.
their area, and of course if the United States intervene in Syria, there will be more sufferings from all sides. There will be more killings from all sides, and we don't know exactly what will emerge after this intervention.
Okay.
So we believe that there should be an agreement between these big powers who are now fighting in Syria, because
Okay.
it's no longer the war of the Syrian regime and the opposition, but it is the war of these big powers. So
Right.
they have to find a political solution to this conflict.
Mr. Sharma, do you think the political solution is possible at all in this kind of circumstance?
Well, at the moment, it doesn't seem possible unless from this brink the Western powers take steps to get back, and which is only possible if the UN report says they cannot say who used it, and they say, all right, without proof, so let's resume the missions that were there in place. You see, who is the biggest gainer? The biggest gainer would be the fundamentalist Al-Qaeda kind of forces, whose larger strategic objective is that the Islamic world's hatred towards the Western world should further expand and increase. So if a large-scale killings takes place, the war happens, that is what is going to happen. And I hope that for the sake of Syrian people, that all powers concerned take a step back and do not escalate it any further, and the Western powers refrain from escalating this by the use of cruise missiles and other things.
Okay.
The West has been dragging its feet on the Geneva too. The Russians, the Syrians, the entire world is pleading with the West, you please fix a date when the Geneva 2 conference should start, the political negotiations, and the Syrians are willing to talk to any group from any side. I mean, the West is looking for a military breakthrough for the rebels, and that has been prolonging the agony, the pain and the suffering and the regional conflagration.
Dr. Awwad, last words to you. You think the Syrian government will now be in any position to agree to a political solution to this problem?
Well, I think the Syrian government have already made its mind from day one that we wanted a solution. There was a genuine unrest in Syria. We all fought for it. We wanted definitely a better life for our children. But then it's hijacked by those groups. And I agree with our Kurdish friend that there is now only the Al-Nusra, which is affiliated group to Al-Qaeda, which is ruling the street of Syria. So therefore we are fighting a proxy war, we are fighting terrorism on behalf of the rest of the world. So if you want to fight terrorism, come join us. Do not have to topple the government, because what is your vision of the changing if you wanted to topple this regime? Is there any plan put in place, or is just destroying the state, the infrastructure, and let anarchy happen as it's happening in Libya or it's happening elsewhere in the Arab world? The aim is to create instability and destroy Syria totally. So there is no questions of letting this government go this way, because the people of Syria are behind the government and rallying, because we know the plan and the plot they have designed for Syria. I don't see any future for a political solution as long as these countries are showing their muscles in the front of the Syrian people. So, but I think there could be a pressure tactic as well if they wanted to go for Geneva too.
Okay. I think on that note we need to end. We're completely run out of time. But there's a very highly complex situation there. Not much hopes there for a political solution at this point of time. But we need to keep watching how it will all proceed. Thanks to all my guests, Fayik Yagizay of the Kurdish party from Turkey, Dr. Awwad, Sanjay Kapoor, J.C. Sharma, and Professor Pasha. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue in the big picture same time tomorrow.